What if I told you there's something even worse than death itself? Imagine this, you're diving into your favorite fantasy book or movie, and the hero is on the brink of death. The stakes couldn't be higher, right? Yet some stories manage to push the boundaries even further, exploring horrors that transcend the common fear of death. By now, I've spent over 2 decades immersing myself in the world of fantasy writing and storytelling, and I've always been intrigued by how different narratives handle the concept of fate. In this video, we'll uncover 5 grim destinies that can take the ultimate end of your characters into completely new directions. Now, why is death so often portrayed as the ultimate fear in storytelling? It's a question that gets to the heart of what makes stories compelling. Death is a universal experience. It's something we all must face eventually. The inevitability gives it an immense emotional weight. When a character's life is on the line, the stakes feel real and the tension becomes palpable. After all, death usually provides a clear and definitive end. It can create moments of high drama and intense emotion, making readers and viewers care deeply about what happens. Think about some of the most memorable moments in fiction. They are often the ones where a beloved character meets their end. These scenes stick with us because they resonate on a deeply human level. By going beyond the finality of death, authors can delve into themes of identity, autonomy, and the very nature of existence. These narratives challenge us to think about what it means to truly live and what it means to suffer. So let's look into the first of such fates, the loss of identity. Imagine being stripped of everything that makes you you. Your thoughts, your memories, and your very sense of self. This is a fate that many fantasy stories explore through the concept of assimilation or loss of identity. One of the most chilling examples comes from science fiction, in particular Star Trek and the Borg. The Borg are a collective of cybernetic beings that assimilate other species into their hive mind. When a person is assimilated by the Borg, they lose all individuality. Their memories, thoughts, and personality are overwritten, replaced by the collective consciousness of the Borg. The horror lies not just in the physical transformation, but in the complete erasure of one's identity and autonomy. Similarly, the Goa'uld from Stargate SG-1 present a terrifying fate as well. These parasitic aliens take control of human hosts, dominating their minds and bodies. The host's consciousness is suppressed, trapped within their own body, while the Goa'uld exerts total control. Both examples tap into primal fears about losing our sense of self and becoming something we no longer recognize. It's a fate that goes beyond physical death, striking at the core of what it means to be human. In your own storytelling, consider how you can use this concept to add layers of depth and tension. What happens when a character faces the threat of losing their identity? How do they fight against it? And what does it reveal about their inner strength and resilience? It's a chilling thought overall, isn't it? The idea of becoming something you don't recognize anymore. Let's take this unsettling idea and dive into our next grim fate. While immortality is often portrayed as a gift or ultimate power, it can also be a curse that brings endless suffering. Eternal torment and immortality push characters into a never-ending cycle of pain and loss that can be far worse than death itself. Take the myth of Prometheus from Greek mythology, for example. Prometheus, who defied Zeus by giving fire to humanity, is punished by being chained to a rock where an eagle perpetually eats his liver, which regenerates every night. This eternal punishment is not just physical, but also psychological, as Prometheus endures endless pain and suffering without the hope of release. Another example comes from the Highlander series, where immortals live through centuries of conflict, loss, and isolation. Though they cannot die by natural means, they face the agony of watching loved ones grow old and die while they remain unchanged. This endless cycle of loss and loneliness highlights the darker side of immortality, where eternal life becomes a source of profound sorrow. Even more haunting is the tale of the Flying Dutchman, a legendary ghost ship doomed to sail the seas forever. The captain and crew are cursed with immortality, condemned to wander the ocean without respite, longing for an end that will never come. These narratives remind us that eternal life can be a double-edged sword. The endless passage of time can bring unending pain, loss, and isolation, challenging the very notion that immortality is desirable. In your own writing, consider how eternal torment and immortality can be used to create deep, impactful stories. How do characters cope with endless suffering? What drives them to keep going despite their torment? And what happens when they seek escape from their eternal fate? These haunting questions lead us to another darker corner of fantasy, the nightmare of transformation and loss of control, where death is only the beginning of a new horror. But before that, if you found anything useful in the video so far, please consider giving it a like to help me grow the channel. Thank you. Imagine a fate where you lose control over your own body and mind, becoming something unrecognizable. In many fantasy stories, transformations that result in a loss of autonomy present a grim destiny where characters are stripped of their humanity and forced into new, horrifying existences. One of the most chilling examples comes from Game of Thrones with the Whites, the reanimated corpses serving the Night King. These creatures are mindless, driven by the will of their master, with no memory or sense of their former lives. The terror lies in the complete loss of autonomy and the grotesque state of their existence. They become mere tools of destruction, a stark reminder that death doesn't always mean rest. Similarly, vampires in Buffy the Vampire Slayer offer a different but equally horrifying take on undeath. Characters like Angel, who retains his soul, struggle with the eternal curse of vampirism. Vampires in this universe are doomed to a life of eternal damnation, battling their monstrous instincts and the isolation that comes with the immortality. Another compelling example then is The Walking Dead, where the transformation into a zombie is both terrifying and tragic. The characters in this series must confront the horror of their loved ones becoming mindless, flesh-eating creatures. The emotional toll of witnessing such a transformation, coupled with the constant threat of becoming one, underscores the relentless dread of living as the undead. But it's not just about undead transformations. Consider Gregor Samsa in Kafka's Metamorphosis. Gregor wakes up one day to find himself transformed into a giant insect, a nightmarish loss of control over his own body. His humanity is eroded as he grapples with his new grotesque form, highlighting the horror of losing one's identity and autonomy. And then there is Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, who is transformed by the power of the One Ring. Smeargold's gradual loss of self as he becomes Gollum illustrates how a powerful external force can corrupt and erode one's identity over time. The eternal struggle between his former self and his corrupted persona adds a profound layer of tragedy to his character. Now, all these stories tap into our primal fears of losing control over our bodies and minds, of becoming something other than ourselves. The characters exist in a liminal space, neither truly themselves nor entirely something else, and this ambiguity fuels their horror. As a writer, think about how the concept of transformation and loss of control can add layers of fear and complexity to your narrative. What emotions do characters experience when faced with such transformations? How do they cope with the threat of losing their identity? And what does it reveal about their deepest fears and desires? Next, we'll explore the psychological torment of losing one's sanity, the descent into endless madness. The descent into madness involves losing one's grasp on reality, sanity, and ultimately oneself. Stories that delve into this psychological torment offer a terrifying glimpse into the human mind unraveling. One of the most famous examples of this is Captain Ahab from Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Ahab's obsessive quest to hunt the white whale consumes him, driving him to madness. His relentless pursuit leads to his destruction and the downfall of his crew. Ahab's madness is a powerful narrative device that explores the depths of obsession and the catastrophic effects it can have on an individual's psyche and those around them. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting a single goal consume your entire being. Another classic tale of madness is Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll's experiments with his alter ego Mr. Hyde lead to a profound psychological struggle. As Hyde's influence grows stronger, Jekyll loses control over his actions and mind, ultimately succumbing to his darker side. This story examines the duality of human nature and the internal battle between good and evil, sanity and madness. The transformation into Hyde symbolizes the complete loss of Jekyll's identity and sanity, highlighting the horror of becoming something monstrous within oneself. These narratives challenge us to consider what happens when we can no longer trust our perceptions or hold on to our sense of self. The psychological torment experienced by characters like Ahab and Jekyll resonates deeply as it reflects the potential fragility of the human mind. When writing your own stories, think about how you can use the theme of madness to add layers of tension and horror. How do characters grapple with their slipping sanity? What are the triggers that push them over the edge? And how do their actions, driven by madness, impact those around them? Madness can be a profound and terrifying fate, one that strips away reality and leaves chaos in its wake. The profound effects of extreme isolation can be as harrowing as any physical torment. When a character is cut off from all human contact, it can lead to a deep sense of unending loneliness and psychological distress. One powerful example of this is Mark Watney's struggle in The Martian by Andy Weir. Stranded on Mars after a mission goes wrong, Watney faces complete isolation from humanity. Despite his ingenuity and determination to survive, the mental and emotional strain of being utterly alone on an alien planet takes a toll. His struggle with isolation highlights the human need for social connection and the psychological impact of extreme solitude. Similarly, the film Castaway portrays the harrowing journey of Chuck Nolan, played by Tom Hanks, who finds himself stranded on a deserted island after a plane crash. Cut off from civilization, Nolan's isolation leads him to form a bond with a volleyball he names Wilson, showcasing the deep human need for companionship. His psychological torment and efforts to maintain his sanity underline the severe consequences of prolonged loneliness. These stories illustrate the intense psychological challenges faced by individuals in extreme isolation. The lack of human interaction and the constant struggle for survival can lead to profound loneliness and despair, pushing characters to their mental limits. In your own storytelling, consider how these fates can add complexity to your characters. How do they cope with being alone? What measures do they take to maintain their sanity? And how do the absence of human connection shape their actions and decisions? Unending loneliness is a powerful narrative element that can reveal the resilience of the human spirit, but also its vulnerabilities. It forces characters to confront their deepest fears and challenges, creating rich and emotional resonant stories. As we've explored those 5 fates, it becomes clear that such stories challenge the binary concept of life and death. They push us to consider what truly makes life worth living. At the heart of these narratives is a deep exploration of what it means to be human. When characters face the loss of identity, eternal torment, transformation, madness, or isolation, they are forced to confront the core of their existence. What truly remains when everything they hold dear is stripped away? These stories compel us to think about the essence of our humanity and the resilience of the human spirit. Moreover, such tales often delve into the ethical dimensions of suffering. For example, Dr. Jekyll's experiments raise questions about the morality of playing God and the consequences of tampering with human nature. Similarly, Captain Ahab's obsessive quest explores the destructive power of obsession and the ethical implications of sacrificing everything for revenge. These narratives ask us to consider what makes life meaningful in the face of immense pain and hardship. Is it the connections we form with others? The pursuit of our goals and dreams? The resilience to endure and overcome? These philosophical questions can enrich your storytelling just by being considered in the first place. They encourage readers to engage with the narrative on a deeper level, prompting them to reflect on their own beliefs and values. As you craft your stories, think about how these themes can enhance your narrative overall. How do your characters grapple with the ethical and philosophical dilemmas they face? How do their struggles shape their identities and their understanding of what it means to be alive? By exploring these profound questions, you can create stories that resonate deeply with your audience, offering them not just entertainment, but also an insight into the human condition. Now, beyond the ultimate fates of your characters, it can be extremely beneficial to explore several of the emotions and dynamics mentioned today from a completely different angle. Check out this video here to find out about the found family trope in order to dive even further into topics of isolation, connection, and other human needs relevant for good storytelling.